That opening sequence was all done on one lens and my Sony FX30, which I don't talk about quite as often as I should. It's an absolute workhorse of a camera. Really, I've owned it for a couple of years now, and every time that I use it, I am more and more impressed by it. So if you are looking for a video focused camera, FX30 is the way to go. But the point of this video is to discuss this brand new lens from Sirui. This is a 20mm T1.8 1.33x anamorphic APS-C lens with autofocus. It comes shortly after the 40mm, which I will just say had really two main problems, and this lens fixes both of those. So let's check it out. It comes in nice packaging, the standard assortment of warranty cards and QR codes, a zippered pouch, and a vacuum sealed lens. Plastic lens caps on the front and the rear, and I have to say this has to be one of the smallest anamorphic lenses I've handled. Its construction is metal and glass, it feels nice in the hand, weight is a modest 494 grams, and the design looks good on this compact body. By comparison, the 40mm is significantly larger. Starting at the rear, there is a metal mount with electronics, a USB-C port for firmware, and a rubber gasket around the mount for weather sealing. Aperture ring can be clicky or de-clicked depending on the switch here, and it is smooth, well done. The gear rings are nice and easy to rotate. 1.33x anamorphic here, Sirui logo, an autofocus lock button, and an autofocus switch. There is a manual focus ring here as well, but it is all electronic, unfortunately, with no hard stops if you do end up using it. It is smooth, but it doesn't give you that traditional feel of a manual focus cine lens. Around the front is a nice convex front lens element. All of the lens specs are printed here. 77mm filter thread, outer diameter for a matte box is 80mm, and inside there are 16 elements in 12 groups. Optically, this lens is not going to rival a spherical prime, but I found that its sharpness was adequate, wide open, certainly more than adequate really for 4K video. You get a bit of barrel distortion that becomes flatter towards the edges, so it's kind of like a mustache wavy line, which for some people will be a positive, but for others will be a negative. And you can see here that the corners and edges are not sharp wide open at T1.8. It does get nice and sharp across the frame at around T4. However, it never really gets up to a spherical something like the Sigma 23mm, for example. Colors and contrast levels are good. I didn't see any warm or magenta hues on this lens, which is a good thing. Now, when it comes to anamorphic lenses, I always talk about three things that make an anamorphic an anamorphic. So first, with an anamorphic lens, the information that the camera sensor is seeing is squeezed horizontally. So when you unsqueeze it or de-squeeze the footage, you get black bars on top and bottom, but you still preserve your resolution because you're using your entire sensor for that image data instead of chopping off many megapixels on the top and on the bottom of your otherwise normal sensor data. This Sirui is a 1.33x, meaning that after you de-squeeze, you get that nice 2.35:1 aspect ratio without any cropping. I've grown to prefer the 1.33x anamorphic because of how simple it is to de-squeeze in post, and it gives you an image that looks like a movie, but not too wide to where it just looks like a thin strip of video. Number two, what some would consider to be the biggest reason to get an anamorphic lens and to use an anamorphic lens is the flare. This 20mm is a blue flare version of this lens. There is also a neutral flare version, which I probably would have preferred. I have to say the flare looks quite good on this one though. It's a lot more prominent than what I got with the 40mm, and in my opinion it looks right where it needs to be. Not overly exaggerated, it's still pretty prominent, but not super subdued where you can't really even tell that it's an anamorphic lens. It might be too much for some, and if that is the case for you, again, the neutral version of this might be less in your face, but the blue streaks across the frame are a classic anamorphic look that in the right stories or in the right use cases adds a lot. Number three is the bokeh. Now, typically with anamorphic lenses, you are looking for elongated oval bokeh balls, so something like this. And this lens, surprisingly at 20mm and T1.8, does not disappoint. Part of this is because this lens can focus so close. 1.31 feet is the minimum focus distance, and that is a lot better than a majority of anamorphic lenses out there. So the result is that you get subject separation, and with subject separation comes bokeh. The balls are definitely ovals, not huge ovals, but ovals nonetheless. They aren't busy, they aren't full of problems, and they aren't distracting. So well done, Sirui, in that regard. And this was problem number 1 with that 40mm lens that I mentioned in the beginning of this video. The 40mm has hexagons for bokeh balls wide open. As you stop them down, they turn into real ovals, but wide open, they are hexagons. It's weird, it's not for me, but again, flaws are almost preferred with anamorphic lenses. It's a strange world to be in, so some people love that sort of stuff. The second problem with the 40mm was the autofocus. It was loud, not very confident, not really that accurate, which admittedly Sirui has made a little better with a firmware update from what I hear. This 20mm is like the little brother that no one thought would amount to anything in life but grew up and got drafted by the NFL. It autofocuses very, very well. It's smooth, it's fast, near silent. It's like this lens really shouldn't be part of the original series. Even in tough lighting conditions, it didn't disappoint. It was never a hindrance to my workflow. I didn't think twice about shooting what I wanted to shoot, and it handled everything that I threw at it nearly as well as a native Sony lens. Focus breathing, however, is visible. This isn't one of those no focus breathing type lenses. Part of why I think this lens is so good and easy to use is it reminds me a lot of the Sigma 16mm. In fact, when you de-squeeze horizontally, you get about a 15mm equivalent APS-C field of view, again horizontally. It's basically the focal length that you get on your standard iPhone camera. The full frame equivalent is 22mm horizontally, whereas the iPhone lens is a 24mm equivalent. What Sirui has here is a much more intriguing anamorphic lens with autofocus. I think this is a big step better than the 40mm, and I think it will be popular in the future. It's not without its optical quirks, but this is a lens that you want to buy because you want that unique look with some of those flaws and quirks and some flares that make your visuals a little bit more interesting. It's currently on Indiegogo with a price of $699 US, and it seems that there are only about 7 of them left according to that website, so check that out in the link in the description down below. And let me know what you guys think of this lens and its performance down in the comment section. Let me know whether you think a Miyata makes for a good Home Depot runner. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more and have a nice day. Bye-bye.